So something I probably could have worked on looking at this is when I got him to do the intake form, his replies were quite rushed. I did sort of entail to like try and put as much detail at the time. However, um, I could have probably pushed that a bit more, and so he was quite brief on some of the answers, which didn't help the intake form as much. But we were able to discover a lot more when we did the initial consultation. But going on from there, only actually training about 1 times a week, which strength conditioning wise is not ideal. I understand he's got quite a busy sort of rugby schedule with how much rugby he does. However, if we want to get to the sort of stronger side of things and start working on these weaknesses, we do need to establish more gym time. So that was something with regards to sort of like in the grand scheme of things of lifestyle habits and how we can get him in the gym more. That's what that got my thought process thinking about. Sleeps quite well, so and his stress levels are relatively okay. In the middle of the road is the way he puts it, with his work with the Royal Air Force. So he's in the military as well. Um, Another component of like what he wants to achieve is, as we go on further, is to do with the RAF and how he can maintain fitness throughout. So going on from there, going on to the initial consultation, uh, we just sort of talked about obviously all those things, trying to paint the best picture of what he wants from life, not just from the gym, just what he wants in general, and how we can help him get to those basic lifestyle guidelines or those muscular or strength conditioning goals that he may have. Um, One of the first things he wanted to look at is obviously he wanted to increase his education, and basically how I could help him boost his knowledge of overall ways of training methods of training for rugby. So eventually I would be doing things, giving him things specific to his goals, um, such as working on that cardiovascular strength, that 0 to 100 speed, that recovery, whilst in that sort of pain zone, which we will also touch on further on. Um, Whilst making this all work with a full-time job in the Royal Air Force. He is a medic in the Royal Air Force, so that consists of a lot of admin time. However, it also means out-of-hours duties, covering the airfields, so on and so forth, making sure nothing happens. So he does find it difficult at times to get in the gym and then to come back out and then to get himself fed properly, so on and so forth. For me, know what I know now, I wanted to then start building his strength from the ground up. So going for that full body resistance or more muscular endurance first to give him that solid base that we always talk about with the OPEX, and building across that strength continuum so he has that ability to actually produce power. Um, so I haven't like just chucked in a load of power straight away. He's going to do a fair bit of full body resistance and building that muscular endurance. However, as we go on, I wanted to give him a sort of taste of that discomfort with the OPEX pain. So I have done that a few times throughout the 12 long-term plan, because I wanted him to experience dis- the discomfort and the need to recover under those in those short periods, because that's what rugby league demands. So that was something really important for me to cover with him. Something else I noticed was the fact that the client didn't get as much hydration as they needed. So going off their basic lifestyle guidelines, we should be getting like half a litre per 10 kilograms of body weight off the top of my head. But the point being is he was only having, he says, 1 protein shake's worth of liquid a day, which was below that. So that was something I really wanted to highlight, the importance of getting more. And it was definitely one of the things I wanted to implement with regards to basic lifestyle guidelines, which we'll push on in a bit. Another factor I wanted to look into was the actual understanding of nutrition. The patient had some understanding of what's good and what's not so optimal. However, delving into sort of raw foods, where the food is actually coming from, how it's processed, is it refined? These things were sort of a bit more of a limiting factor. So, as a general rule of thumb, because I think it's a bit more of a complex basic lifestyle guidelines, I want to start them a bit more simply, to be honest with you. But over time, I have discussed like what he should be trying to get on his plate for now to start building those healthier habits with regards to protein, carbs, and fat intakes, depending on what he's doing on that day. But for now, we're keeping it sort of relatively simple as he builds better habits first, and then he can move on to more complex habits. Another thing that stood out for me was his thoughts around running. So going back to his fitness test, struggles with the fitness test, doesn't have a positive outlook on running, says it's pointless running. So for example, anything on the treadmill or like how the RF fitness test is taken. So it's just in a sports hall, 20 meters apart. So for me, another factor was how I can implement CV-like training, but make it enjoyable for the client in a way that he gets something out of it, but he remains stimulated throughout. So it was important for me to put in MAP 8, MAP 7 like workouts to give him that sort of target of that bit more of an aerobic work. However, keeping it sort of intense with several different mixed modal exercises that can challenge him. Moving on to OPEX body. So this didn't go as to plan as I would like. That's down to the fact that I haven't got an in-body. We don't have an in-body where I work, so I couldn't take specific measurements with regards to body fat percentage or skeletal muscle mass. However, I was able to work out his basal metabolic rate, which is a 1978. And he obviously took his body weight as well, which is 98.9 kilograms. This would be something for future reference that I definitely want to get more of. Get the actual equipment so I can perform these said tests, so we can bring some more objectivity to it. So, OPEX move, that was the next factor we looked into. Going through that, the patient actually moved relatively well considering his sort of experience of each movement. I was quite happy across the board. There was no drastic issues. However, there were a few fails throughout. So, for example, the air squat, the client was able to hit the depth, kept the knees tracking toes, but was able to keep his arms in line with the ear. The client also showed areas of trying to get more knee flexion by going onto his toes slightly. So maybe some limiting factors like ankle dorsiflexion and his ability just to get his knees over whilst keeping an upright torso and keeping the ears close to the body. So maybe some limiting factors mobility wise. The split squat, though not a fail, he did pass with the lunge test. Excuse me. His right side control was limited in comparison to his left, so that might be a factor to look into when it comes to actually what I prescribe him. For me, it was like, right, let's get some unilateral exercises in there so we can compare left to right and start building on discrepancies we may have from left compared to right. Going on from there, we had the straight leg raise test, and we found that there was a noticeable difference between the left and right, with the left getting 70 degrees and the right getting 80 degrees. The client did notice this and found the difference. He could see himself once I showed him the videos, so he can see the difference between left and right. And obviously trying to get extra range of motion throughout that as well. One of the clearer factors that was reoccurring was the shoulder. The client seemed to be getting a bit more discomfort when it came to the shoulder. This sort of stood out on the reverse plank and side plank, making complaints about the shoulder and how it was uncomfortable at the time. And this sort of showed in his actual testing as well, where he didn't hit the 90 seconds we'd like to 90 seconds we would like to have seen, only getting 34 seconds on the right, 37 seconds on the left. So for me, working on that shoulder stability, shoulder strength, which he also said in his own words is quite a limiting factor, has definitely played a component in what I've prescribed him. But also trying to keep things again unilateral, so we can compare left to right and he can give me feedback on those monthly consultations. So moving on, we've done body, we've done move, and now we've moved on to work. And we went on to the air bike 10-minute max calories. The score the client got was 113.8 calories in 10 minutes, with an air bike weight conversion of 176. This score is not as good as we'd like it to be. We'd like it to be up towards body weight in pounds, as even though that's incredibly difficult, but we'd like to get to as close to that as we can. That sort of reflected in how the sort of test went. I made it pretty pertinent that when the client performs the 10-minute max cal test, they try and do it so they get the most optimal score across the board. So performing 70 to 80% across the board rather than going 100 and finishing at 30%. The client themselves, they found the test very difficult. Initially, they felt they went off too quickly. I felt when I saw this, I thought they went off too quickly as well. And they sort of dropped off quite quickly. Within sort of having 5 minutes left of the test, they were literally blowing out. So they were very, very fatigued. So for me, seeing that, I was like, how can I stretch out that ability to maintain high power output on the assault bike, so we can improve that score? And how that would come across in the rugby league side of things, and how that would come across when performing the RF fitness tests, when you're struggling with the turns, the sudden turns, the sharp turns, going backwards the 20 metres. And like I said, with the rugby league, in the sense of being able to get back up when you're that fatigued and your heart rate's through the roof, and being content to work. So by working, eventually getting some OPEX pain work in there, I think would give him a better pitch, or give him a chance to work on this area a bit more, getting used to the discomfort, getting used to pushing that power output high when he has to. Obviously, this is a bit further down the line, but it is something I do want to implement. With the strength conditioning side of things, there's also I wanted to build his knowledge alongside it. I didn't want him just sort of going through the process and just following blindly. I wanted him to learn why he was doing it, what he was doing, and what the sort of goal was. So, like, when I implemented the strength and conditioning, sort of the full body resistance training, I told him the reasoning behind it was to build that foundation to work towards that absolute strength and power, which made sense to him. And then when it comes to the more specific stuff, so working towards the strength components, getting heavier, reducing the reps and increasing the sets and increasing the weight, that will make sense to him as well. And then he can basically build the picture that OPEX teaches us. I can help him sort of picture it the same way, and how it all sort of clicks into place, so he's not remaining confused about any of it. Whilst trying to build the strength side of things, obviously I had to build the conditioning as well, for several reasons. I knew that he wanted to be able to last longer in a rugby match. He wanted to be able to have more impact in the rugby match. So for me, building that cardiovascular endurance when he has that sort of quite a limited capacity right now, especially when he was struggling with RA fitness testing, that is something really important to me to build up. Speaking of, we also need to build up for the RF fitness test, so the client doesn't feel sort of panicked about these things. It reduces stress levels around the fitness test. If you're not worried about it because you know you'll pass it, the stress levels tend to decrease around it, and that is an important goal for me as well. So I implemented this through 15 to 16 weeks of MAP 8, going to 7, going to 6, giving them plenty of opportunity to understand the methodology. Um, Basically, when it comes to the map work, explain what the map work is and how it can cross over to rugby. The actual map work I've given him has some rugby specific movements. It is meant to be constant movement at a certain intensity, as all map work is. But as we go more into the season, the map work will eventually sort of drop down into shorter, harder intervals. So he has to work harder in those short periods, which will replicate the rugby a bit more. And I've already said this a few times, but I have programmed in there in the long term a few times some anaerobic and alactic work, power work, okay, to be introducing that to him and seeing if we can build his ability to produce power. So we're going to start doing that short period of times. However, it will happen a couple of times throughout the whole process. So again, I've written some of this down because there was quite a lot I was trying to keep my thought process. But moving on to the short-term plan and how I went about that, I wanted to get full body resistance in there, working on some of the areas needed in rugby, but also addressing some of the weaknesses the clients had. However, I had to sort of think about how I would implement this around the client's rugby. So he would train on Wednesdays, or he could have matches on Wednesdays, and then he would be playing rugby either Fridays or Saturdays. So it's quite complex. However, I've tried to program the sessions so that he has as little time and attention resistance before a match, and he has a rest period before a match and after a match. So that was always important for me, so he has the best opportunity to perform as good as he can in those environments. I've also said on those days where it is a bit more awkward to reduce the intensity around sessions if he has for some reason a match on Thursday or something along those lines, or maybe a match on Wednesday, perhaps not going as intense on those leg sessions and maybe just going body weight. This is something I had to be relatively flexible with, but try and make it work as best for the client as I could. Obviously, with regards to rest days, I just made sure they were around the rugby games and rugby matches. So if he had a game on a Wednesday, he would have the rest days around there. But if he had a game on the Saturday, the rest days would be around there. And he would have to we would jig the program around so it made it work as he seemed fit, as best we could anyways. That was a priority. We had to remain relatively flexible with regards to his schedule with his rugby. So, moving on to why did I prescribe what I did for lifestyle? For me, with the fact that he was getting all of this new information with regards to nutrition, with regards to his new program, which he had never followed a proper personalized program, and then also having lifestyle guidelines, I felt might be a bit overwhelming for him initially. So I did prescribe him some lifestyle guidelines to follow: sleep, energy, and hydration. However, I tried to keep them for this first month anyways as simple as possible. With the sleep, just trying to making sure he's going to bed or waking up at the same times. Not trying to go to bed too late, and trying to build a habit and build consistency with this so it doesn't become a chore for him. Hydration, as we said before, was a clear thing that we wanted to improve on. So I've set him a sort of benchmark of how much water I would like him to try and drink. He's bought himself a bigger water bottle to help with this as well. And lastly, energy. So this is something a bit more I wanted to relate towards the client's just sort of life and what he actually wanted from his life. And I feel like this is something that if you really want to get the best out of any client, you should be pushing them towards as well. It's like, how do you want to achieve something for yourself in the future? Like that's something that's a big goal for you. You always talk about like having this large outlandish goal we should aspire towards, and I sort of said try and picture that as like, how could you do that by doing very small steps? I mean, like the aim being perhaps never reaching that outlandish goal, but the progress we can make by doing small steps towards the goal would be majorly positive. So I sort of set out a thing like try and do one thing a day, perhaps that could be beneficial towards you or your goals. Just spend as it could be a minute, it could be 5 minutes, it could be half an hour, it could be an hour, but try and do something daily that will be beneficial to what you want to achieve. Um, the client is young and he's got plenty of years ahead of him. I feel like it's just like how can we use them optimally to help him build towards his goals, and maybe how towards his rugby league goals, towards his fitness goals, towards his life goals. What does he want to do? So I wanted to get him thinking about that. Perhaps not that deep just yet, but I wanted to get him thinking and start build new habits. So I didn't want it too complex, too much to think about, too many. I thought just nice, simple ones. Drink more water. Make sure you go to bed on time. Make sure you wake up at the same time, and make sure you just put 1 minute or one thing a day of effort into yourself. And that's what. That's the conclusion, basically, of how I came to my sort of idea and why I used what I did to transition into design. So to summarize, full body resistance, just to start building the foundation to work towards ultimately building more strength and power. Lower intensity, longer map 8, working down to 7, working down to 6, eventually just sort of building towards that sort of the rugby season, but also having that ability to keep in fitness all year round, so you can pass the RF fitness test. Trying to do obviously a squat, bend, lunge, core on the Monday, and then a push pull on the Thursday. Trying to get those components that we want to see our clients do to build that solid foundation, doing that full body resistance, trying to get the fitness around his sort of rugby training day, but making sure he's definitely having a rest day on each side of a game day, and if that sort of swaps around, he sort of has to be a bit more flexible with that. So there's a lot of information, and I do apologise if it's all over the place because it's the first time I've ever done anything like this. But I hope that makes sense, and happy to answer any questions you may have about my reasoning behind my programming for Alex. Thank you. Hello everyone, this is Tom doing my transition to design for my OPEX client Alex. Basically going through my thought process and how I came to the conclusions I did and programmed the program I did for him. So starting from the top, looking at the intake form, what was it that stood out for me? So first things first, he had a real passion for rugby. It was his main sport. It's the only sport he really puts any actual effort into, and when he does, it's 100%. Straight away though, rugby, you need to be very well conditioned, you need to be very strong for the sport as well, be able to produce power in short bursts, and also to have quick recovery, especially in rugby league, which is the version he plays. You need to be able to get up and down quick to get back into defence, ready to hit the attacking team again and again and again. So straight off the bat, I'm thinking, what aspects of Alex's abilities can I improve on? So obviously the strength side of things, the 0 to 100 speed work. However, also, as we'll find out as we go on, the CV side of things as well, so the cardiovascular and his ability to recover, which has been a bit more of an issue as we delve deeper into it. Which comes to the other side of it. So Alex is a really good rugby player, loves playing the sport, however does the sports side of it really, really well, however doesn't manage the strength and conditioning stuff quite as well. In the intake form, he would sort of consider himself like a novice level of experience in the training. He had experience training with a father of one of his mates or something along those lines, who gave him guidance with general sort of bodybuilding like training, so nothing ever sort of rugby specific. And apart from that, he's just followed general programs that he's found on the internet and done that through. He's had alright results. However, he's sort of struggled with maintaining this over time and continuing to stay committed to the process. So that's half the reason why it came across to me. Another prominent part of what stood out to me and what actually led to sort of more of my program is obviously the fitness requirement of the Royal Air Force. So in the RAF, you have to do the multi-stage fitness test, press-ups and sit-ups. Alex has had continuous issues with the MSFT, multi-stage fitness test, and it's something that he wants to know that if I could ask him any day of the week to perform that test, he could pass it. Whereas in the past, he's got so close to failing, well, he's failed so many times before that he was almost had to leave the RAF. So we don't want that happening again. So alongside the rugby side of things, we also have the responsibility of keeping Alex fit all year round, or more specifically towards his fitness test requirement dates, so that he can then pass without those issues. So that is another big factor that came to mind and was an immediate thing that attracted me to what we could figure out and help him with. So I wrote this down because it's a lot of information, and it was basically sort of how I sort of concluded the reasons why I came to my choice for his long-term plan. So, as I've already said, we wanted to build a real solid foundation for his rugby. He's very passionate about the sport. He's good at the sport. However, the strength conditioning side is lacking. But it's that strength and conditioning side which will bring him to the next level. Alex, going back to his initial consultation, wants to be playing rugby at rugby league at a higher level, and like I said, he does really well on the rugby league side of things. He's got really good camaraderie and community with the rugby RAF, rugby union and league associations. However, to get him to that next level, we can get those extra inches through strength and conditioning. So for me, over the long-term period, it was about how I can build a foundation for our client, give him the foundation he needs to start then building that absolute strength, that strength speed, that speed strength, that absolute going towards that power output into that ballistic speed work. But like we always said, we need to build that foundation beforehand. So that's why I've given him initially, obviously this first 4 weeks, more high volume, lighter weight, more time and attention to get the quality of the movement. But obviously we're talking about the long term here. I made sure to program at least one map session in the week. However, on the Saturdays, if he's had a match cancelled, I also gave him another map option there as well. The reason being is I still want him to improve his overall fitness, and he's trying to do this around the rugby season. But we need to still make sure we work on priority B, which is also staying fit all year round for his RAF fitness test, so he doesn't have the stresses he had last year come back to haunt him. So it was difficult, but I put those sessions just before like rugby training, because I thought, get this fizz in. Yes, that'll flush out the system a bit. Yes, you'll have DOMs in other aspects. However, the time and attention stuff, I think I'd rather him be sort of sweated and worked rather than lifted a lot and then became sort of stiffer because of it. I would rather him more limber when it came to sort of the rugby side of things.